Hi, I'm Holly from Church at the Corner, and we're so glad you've joined us for a series on an important topic, anxiety. Of course, all of us deal with anxiety in our lives. We all have ups and downs, and sometimes things are very stressful. But after the year 2020, we know that that's gone up a few notches. So we thought it was really important, especially in light of so many people who have been dealing with fear and uncertainty and unfortunately loss, to take some time and unpack the topic of anxiety. So to help us do that, we have some very special guests. We have Doctors Rick and Kathy Roepke of the Christian Family Institute right here in Bowling Green, and I'd like to introduce you to them and tell you a little bit about them. Rick and Kathy founded the Christian Family Institute in 1996. Dr. Rick is a certified cognitive behavioral therapist and a certified marriage and family counselor. And his wife, Kathy, is a licensed marriage and family therapist. We're really, really happy to have them here and to help us learn to manage our anxiety so that it doesn't overwhelm us.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, Pete.
Thank you so much. It's a real treat. So just starting out, I thought we might just lay the foundation of telling us what exactly is anxiety. We hear it all the time, but what is it and what type of triggers does it set off in us?
Okay. When we look at anxiety, probably a good way of looking at it is kind of following a bell curve. We could start getting stressed out over things. Okay, we start feeling stressed. For example, it could be we're going to take an exam, so we start to get stressed about the exam. But after the exam is done, the stress goes away. Well, then going up that bell curve, then we have that worry state where we start to loop things about the exam. You know, what if? What if I fail? What if I get kicked out of school? What ifs? Okay. Well, the longer we're in that worry state, the more it moves us closer to then the anxiety state. The anxiety state is a medical condition. It's setting off. We have these two little glands on our kidneys that start to flood our system with the stress hormones such as adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. That's where we start to feel the pit in our stomach. And we feel a pit in our stomach because it's shutting down our digestive system. We start to get sweaty palms. Our heart rate starts to race. And it's all moving up. And under all of that, though, is we got to realize is that it's fear that is driving that. Again, like I said, the fear of the what ifs, the what's going to happen when, it's just kind of moving up that bell curve. And what happens is when fear reaches a certain point, especially that anxiety state, it shuts down the medial prefrontal cortex. That is our reasoning center. This is where we're able to reason through something, to problem solve. Well, when that gets shut down, then we're going to a state of panic. That's when we start to react to things. We look to others to help us get through it. So medically, it's affecting a whole lot of things going on. So if anybody says it's just all in your head, well, that's not the case. Once it's in your head, it floods the entire system.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. I know that so many people deal with anxiety, and they may not have even understood exactly what's causing this. So that's a great foundation for us to build off of. You mentioned that sometimes it can get to a point of panic and some irrational thought that we just can't overcome. Are there other emotional reactions? Does everybody panic? Do you get angry? What other ways might it manifest in our lives?
I mean, some people, it goes into panic attacks, but not everybody does. It can affect sleep. A lot of times there can be sleep disturbance. There can be irritability. Just also inability to focus. There's so much going on, and thoughts racing in your head that you can't focus on the task in front of you. Some people get forgetful, and so it can manifest in a lot of different ways. So that's sometimes loss of appetite, sometimes overeating. Just lots of things. Some people want to isolate, and just get away from people. Some people want to sleep all the time as an escape. So that anxiety, it can manifest in a wide variety. For some people, even it comes out like in physical ways, ulcers or, migraines. Not to say if someone has a migraine, it's because of this, but, that could be a reason, So it can cause digestive issues, things like that.
We look at like irritable bowel syndrome, TMJ, because when we start to get anxious, we start to clench. Bruxism, where we start to grind our teeth at night, So especially the sleep. We're talking about the sleep, and we talked about earlier where we wake up between 1 and 3. It's called secondary induced insomnia, and what's actually getting us up is the adrenaline, and the brain when we go to sleep, it doesn't shut off. Okay, it goes into overload, and so it starts to kick in things, and the adrenaline starts to raise up, and that's when we start to wake up, like I said, between 1 and 3 with racing thoughts, and then we can't go back to sleep until right before we're supposed to get up. We look at things like that. Even we'll start to, when we get anxious, it affects us too, even our diet. We'll start to self-medicate on carbs. And what happens is that we start to feel anxious, so we eat carbs. And not knowing that after a certain point that there's something called carb-induced depression or anxiety state. So actually complicating the anxiety, we get stressed, so we stress eat. So, and we very rarely do we stress eat on broccoli, or
coffee nut
or, yes, that's what it is. Or ice
I
cream.
just bought M&Ms this weekend.
That's what it is. So we always go to the carbs. And again, after a while, then we eat carbs, and about an hour and a half later or so, then we get in the slump. So we go and we repeat. And that's when it kicks in something called a beta endorphin that causes more of an anxiety state.
And then you step on the scales and you realize you gained weight, and then you get mad at yourself and more depressed.
Yeah.
So it's just
It's a vicious cycle at that point.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It is really, really fascinating, though, to think about it. And just, as you're speaking, of course, I immediately think of times that I've reacted in these various ways, or been so upset that I was up all night, or, lost my appetite, or, just couldn't seem to get something off my mind. I kind of could, when you say consume your thoughts, because it just becomes overwhelming. So it is really fascinating as you're describing what's happening in the body, and we really stop to think about all of the different or many of the different ways that it can show up in your life. So thank you for sharing that. We were talking about sometimes, you're in the now with the test or whatever immediate challenge that you're facing. What about anxiety that's perhaps influenced by your past, or maybe some expectations of how you think something should be, and then it doesn't work out? Are things like that contributing factors to anxiety?
They definitely can. I mean, two different things. I mean, our expectations can definitely set us up for disappointment and frustration and anxiety if our expectations are not realistic. And so that's one. But then in the past as well, if it's been past trauma or past disappointment, past hurt, certain things in the present can trigger that old woundedness, and it's like, oh, that, and then the brain associates the two of those things, and it's like fanning a flame, because that was bad, this is going to be bad or worse, in which it might or it might not, but it's like we will assume that, so yeah, it can.
Is that kind of a defense mechanism almost? And I don't know, it might not be, but I got hurt before.
Yes,
and now I'm scared that I'm going to get hurt, and I need to maybe react in a way that, because I'm sure the worst is coming.
Right. And so I got to be prepared, got to protect myself, so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's, especially if we look at the past and looking at how our thoughts go, our thought really go into 3 different categories. It goes in past, present, future. Okay, the past is should have, could have, would have. Why didn't I? If I only would have, then things would be different. Which we don't know is true, but we linger there, and the longer we linger there, which is about 30% of our thought life, the longer we linger there, the more depressed, guilt-ridden, shame we start to experience.
Regret and remorse.
Regret and remorse. And then 60% of our thought life, if we're not careful, is future-oriented. And now that's where a lot of the anxiety comes from, is future-oriented situations. Like we play the worst case scenario out in a future event. We catastrophize. It would be horrible. It would be awful if this took place. Or we think of how others would be responding to us in the future. Well, they're probably going to think I'm this or that, which we don't have a clue. We can't mind read. But the longer we linger with that, the more anxiety, more stress, the burden that we have for the future. And that only leaves about 10% for the here and now. And we could do ourselves such a big favor by living more in the now than we do the past or the future. Because even with, I look back even with the past, we also have to understand that 95% of our behavior and our decisions come from our subconscious. It doesn't even come from our conscious. Only 5% kind of feeds that. Which gives even light to a scripture where King Solomon says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he shall be. Well, the heart in Hebrew meant belief system. So basically, as you believe. Now, the interesting thing about the subconscious, it cannot discern between what is real or imagined. It's in charge of all these wonderful things, involuntary muscle movement, breathing, all this wonderful stuff. But two things it cannot do is discern between what is real or imagined, or what has taken place now or 20 years ago. Wow. So when we start to go to the past and we start to loop that, it floods the system because it's thinking, oh, it's happening at this point. It's happening right now.
Wow.
You know? Or when we go to the future, what if, what might? It's saying, yep, it's taking place right now. So it is. That's why it's so important for us to get a handle on what goes on in our happy little noggin.
It sounds like we can risk sort of robbing ourselves of joy, or at least normalcy, in the here and now, and really set ourselves up for a lot of extra unnecessary pain that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
And even the difficult things that do happen, many times they're not going to be at the magnitude that we thought they were going to be. Had we not worked ourselves up into a frenzy and just kind of shut down, you know.
Oh, mine's the dentist.
Yeah.
And so you start to think you could start to rob yourself. Let's say you have a dental appointment 2 weeks from now and you're worried about it for 2 weeks. You just robbed you of all kinds of energy in that 2 week span of time, dreading the worst case scenario. And then once you get there and it takes place, it's not even as bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm not crazy. I like my dentist, but I don't want to go.
no,
Right.
no.
I'm like you, especially when the little drills come on. You know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So let me just look here. So just practically speaking, I know, everyone's different. There's different levels of severity, so there's not a one size fits all. But what are just some practical strategies that you can give us to try to not let anxiety overwhelm us?
I think the first thing is we have to identify what we can control versus what we can't control.
Yes.
If you think about it, it is, you got two zones. You have direct control zone and then you have no control zone. The direct control is what we actually can directly control. Okay? The no control, this is where the stress and the anxiety, the worry live. All right? It is when we start to focus on the things like we can't control, such as projecting onto others what we think that they might be thinking about us. What we start to try to read their minds, or we play out a scenario that's way in the future. Because again, we can't control the future, nor can we control the past. Right. We can influence the future, but we can't control it. But the more we live in that no control zone and not focus on what we can control, that's the difference between worry and concern. I want to be concerned about things, but concern equates to activity. I'm concerned about this, so I'm going to do this to deal with this. If I'm worrying about something, it's like trying to get from Bowling Green to Nashville in a rocking chair. It serves no purpose, and all you do is go backwards. You cannot get anywhere by worrying. And sometimes people feel guilty if they're not worrying. Or they get upset with others because they're not worrying as much as they are. It's like they don't but that's not it. It is, I want to be concerned. I don't want to worry. So one thing that comes to mind is really focus on the things you can control, not on what you can't control.
Another thought, and what I will tell people a lot of times too, is divide it up. These things I can control. Write it down, identify it. What are the things that I'm worried about that I cannot control? So then you identify it. You can see it. So the things I can't control that, but what can I do? And that will bring you back over into the area, that you can control or influence, but then you feel like you're doing something about it, and there's always something, that you can find that you can do, even if, and I don't mean this to minimize at all, but if there's nothing else that you can do but pray about it, that's a start. That's a start, and that's doing something. Actually, that's the most powerful thing we can do, But then, maybe there's something else, maybe there's nothing else. But if there's nothing else, that's enough. But a lot of times you can find other things.
Yeah, and that's where you look at, there's 4 regions that you start to look at and identify that you can control. Naturally, the spiritual, especially if we're focused on future-oriented things. And again, for me, that is extremely important. What helps me is understanding that God's already in my future. One of his name is Yahweh Nishi. That means he is our banner. He goes before us. I don't have to worry about he's there. And so I will draw from that. So what are we doing spiritually that we can directly control? We can connect with his word. We can pray. Then it's emotionally. What are we doing emotionally? Are we talking to others? Are we writing this down? Are we logging it out? And you have a unique way that you tell folks
Oh,
to
the journaling?
log. Yeah, the journaling.
You may tell
Oh,
me
you
now?
could tell, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I did this in one of our Facebook Lives last year. But let me just say, too, that you talked about, what was the word did you just use? Talking to others. Over this past year, there's been so much isolation.
Yes.
That has been so bad for people emotionally.
Yes.
I mean, I get it why they say to do that, but we are social beings, and we need connection.
That's
somehow.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was just my thing about that is, there's, being alone is not always a good thing. Okay, so this style of journaling, I call it vomit journal, and so what I tell people, and I'll try not to drag this out, but so I hate to vomit worse than anything in the world. I mean, I will fight it to the end because there's just nothing pleasant about it. Right. And Rick will say, just go on, you'll feel better. I'm like, no. And I'll fight it all day long if I have to, Gosh. But there comes a point where it doesn't matter and it's coming out. And so you best hightail it to the proper receptacle, which is the toilet. So what I will tell people in getting your vomit journal, go to the dollar store and get the cheapest spiral notebook that you can find. Now in this day and age, some people would rather type it, so I mean whatever works. But if you're a handwriter, go get you a cheap spiral notebook. So when that time comes, and I'm going to puke, so I'm in the bathroom. I mean, so when that's happening, my eyes are shut the whole time. I don't want to see what's going on. Because your face doesn't belong in a toilet either, It's just gross. And so with this kind of journaling, what you're going to do when you feel it bubbling up, the emotion, you get your paper and you click your pen on and you put it at the top of the page and you close your eyes and you write. Or you type, but you do the whole thing with your eyes closed. You don't worry about if you're staying in the lines. You don't worry about crossing your T's and dotting your I's or what it looks like. You just eyes closed, and it's just a raw purge, raw emotional purge. Wow. If you get to the end of the page and you got more, then you flip the page and you keep your eyes closed and you keep going. And some people say, well, what if I can't stop? And it's like, you will. When you're vomiting, you will reach the end, and there's nothing left, and then you're done. So here's the thing, though, how this style of journaling is different, not only with your eyes closed, but then, so like after I throw up, first thing I'm going to do is flush. First thing you're going to do when you finish journaling in your vomit journal is tear those pages out and shred them. Because when you throw up, You're not going to say, I might save that and come back and look through it later. That's just gross, you know? So you're going to flush it, you know? With this kind of journaling, you're going to shred it. Don't go back and read it. Throwing up can be exhausting. I mean, you're wiped out when you're done. This kind of journaling can wipe you out when you're done.
Right.
So it can be emotionally exhausting. So you need buffer time after you do this kind of journaling. Don't do this right before you go to bed either. That's not good. But have some buffer time where you can go get a cup of hot chocolate, hot tea, iced tea, Diet Coke, I mean, whatever, and just sit and breathe and reflect on what just happened. You know, maybe some soft, relaxing music, you know, aromatherapy, but just to be and reflect on what just happened. Then if there are things like, wow, I didn't know I was hanging on to that, then go write that down somewhere else. And then process that or pray about that or talk to a friend or a counselor or somebody like that if like some significant things come out. But everybody that does this, they will come back to me and say, I feel so much better. You know, I had no idea, you know, but it's just a way you block everything else out and just whatever you've been holding in there comes out. And it needs to, because when you hold it in, it contaminates your whole system.
And that's where we look at the emotional part, is to get it out. You know, spiritually, what are we doing? Are we? That's why I think it's so important to connect with the body of Christ in church, because that goes back to the spiritual, but it also addresses the relational. We have to be able to connect with others. Okay, we have to participate and be involved in that. We just can't just watch all the time from a screen. We have to be involved. We need that touch. In fact, UCLA did a study that we need 4 to 6 appropriate touches per day just to maintain emotional and psychological well-being. We need that touch. And so this robbed us. The other thing it robbed us of this past 2020 was predictability. It removed the predictability, so it threw everybody into a state of flux. So that's why to get back into and be a part of is so critical. So spiritually, what are we doing? Emotionally, what are we doing? Are we feeding ourselves with the right stuff? You know, are we reading books on how to tweak our thinking? There's books like Telling Yourself the Truth by William Backus.
And Rethink for a Change by Roepke.
Yes.
Well, and just little things like that is what are we feeding ourselves? But then we look at physically. What are we doing physically? Not only is it diet to stay away from, the carbs, because again, that produce more of the anxiety and depression, but are we exercising? What are we doing to disperse that stress? What are we doing to, as far as just even 30 minutes 3 times a week can boost not only your metabolism, but after the 20-minute mark, it releases the serotonin. So it's good for us. And the other thing, too, is just having fun. Just enjoying, and this goes back with relationships, laughing. 5 minutes of a belly laugh is equivalent to 10 milligrams of morphine.
Oh my
and so the whole thing is to enjoy. And God put us in all this in us to do. We just don't do. We get locked into more of the problem focus than we do the solution behind the issue.
Fresh air as well. Being out in the sunshine, fresh air can do wonders, you know. And, you know, here in Kentucky, we tend to have gloomy winters and all that. And so we recommend light therapy lamps
Oh, wow.
in the wintertime.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. You can get on Amazon and put that, you know, light therapy lamp in the search bar and it'll pull up a ton.
Yeah.
You know, and so in the wintertime or on rainy, gloomy days and you're feeling blah, you know, turn on. They're about the size of an iPad.
Okay.
You know, there's some that are round, there's some that are alarm clocks.
Wow.
But that can help too if you can't get outside and be in the sunlight.
Oh, that's a great idea. These are such great ideas. These are wonderful. I just think about like a little toolkit to try to help prepare ourselves, because anxiety is going to happen from time to time.
Yeah.
So these are just some outstanding ideas and tips. And in our next session, we'll kind of dig into some other things. But I just want to thank you so much for being with us and starting to lay that groundwork. on how we can deal with anxiety and not let it overwhelm us. So thank you again, Dr. Rick and Kathy Roepke.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you for watching. We hope this has been an encouragement to you.